In the vast wilderness of the Cascade Mountains, two orphaned eagle chicks, symbols of untamed freedom, were fading from the world. With all human efforts failing, their last chance for survival rested not with science or expertise, but with the gentle heart of an animal considered their natural enemy, a German shepherd. What follows is the story of an impossible family and a bond that defied all laws of nature. As we share this incredible journey with you, we hope you'll help us give a voice to more stories just like it. Liking this video and subscribing to our channel ensures these quiet miracles of love and loyalty will always have a place to be heard. The silence of the Cascade foothills was a language Sam Caldwell understood better than words. At 70, his world had shrunk to the dimensions of his small log cabin. The vast expanse of the surrounding Washington forest, and the steady, reassuring presence of his dog, Major, an 8-year-old German shepherd of classic black and tan, was more than a pet. He was a living chronicle of the last 8 years, the silent keeper of routines and memories since Sam's wife, Ellen, had passed. His intelligent, amber eyes missed nothing, from the subtle shift in the wind that predicted rain to the deeper shift in Sam's mood on the anniversary of Ellen's death. This morning, a fragile peace settled over the valley. The air, washed clean by the night's fury, smelled of wet earth and pine resin. Sam sat on his porch, a mug of coffee warming his gnarled hands, watching the mist curl up from the dark green canopy. Major lay at his feet, head on his paws, but his ears twitched, scanning the symphony of the recovering forest. The storm had been a bad one. It had rolled in from the west without warning, a churning wall of black cloud that had turned midday into twilight. The wind had screamed like a freight train, and a single deafening crack of lightning had shaken the cabin to its foundations, making even the stoic Major press closer to Sam's leg. "Let's go see what she did, boy," Sam said, his voice a low rumble. Major was on his feet in an instant, his tail giving a single, decisive thump against the wooden planks. They walked their usual perimeter, a path worn into the forest floor by years of habit. The damage was significant. Younger trees were bent and broken, and a wide swath of forest was littered with fallen branches. But Major was not on his usual patrol. He moved with a purpose that Sam recognized immediately, his nose low to the ground, his body tense. He ignored the familiar sense of squirrel and deer, leading Sam further east toward the old growth stand. He stopped at the base of what was once the forest's grandest pine. A jagged white scar ran the length of its massive trunk, a fatal wound from the night's lightning strike. The ground around it was a chaotic mess of splintered wood and fresh earth, and scattered among the debris were the pathetic remains of a massive nest. Sam's heart sank. He'd watched the eagle pair that lived there for years, a symbol of the wild, enduring spirit of this place. He scanned the branches, hoping to see them, but there was nothing. Major nudged his hand with a wet nose, then whined softly, looking down at the base of the tree. There, huddled in a shallow depression, were two tiny bundles of gray down. They were no bigger than Sam's fists, trembling violently from a cold that had little to do with the morning air. Their eyes, a dark, cloudy blue, were wide, with a terror so profound it felt ancient. Of the mother, there was only a tragic stillness a few yards away, a heap of brown and white feathers that would never fly again. "Oh, you poor little things," Sam whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He gently scooped them up, their tiny bodies feeling impossibly fragile in his calloused hands. They let out weak, terrified peeps, but were too cold and shocked to struggle. Major stood guard, his body a rigid shield between them and the rest of the world, a low growl rumbling in his chest at the unseen dangers that had stolen their family. Back in the warmth of the cabin, Sam's old ranger instincts took over. He lined a sturdy cardboard box with one of Ellen's old flannel shirts, positioning it near the wood stove. He minced some fresh trout he had in the fridge, offering tiny morsels on the tip of his finger. But the eaglets refused. They huddled together in the furthest corner of the box, their high-pitched, frantic cries filling the quiet cabin. The sounds were needles of sorrow, a desperate call for a mother who would never answer. For hours, Sam tried everything he could think of. He tried different food, adjusted the temperature, even tried mimicking a mother bird's call, a foolish attempt that only made them shrink further away. Nothing worked. He was a man who had spent a lifetime understanding nature's rhythms, but he could not break through the wall of their trauma. As evening fell, casting long shadows across the room, the eaglets' cries grew weaker, their tiny bodies more still. Sam watched them, a heavy sense of failure settling in his chest. He had brought them out of the storm, but he feared he had only delivered them to a slower, quieter end inside the four walls of his home. The fire in the wood stove had dwindled to a bed of glowing embers, casting a faint, pulsing light across the cabin. Sam sat in his armchair, the weight of the day pressing down on him. The silence was broken only by the whimpering peeps from the cardboard box, sounds that had grown weaker with each passing hour. It was the sound of life giving up, and it was a sound Sam knew too well. He had failed them. He had faced down cougars and rescued stranded hikers, but these two small, terrified lives were slipping through his fingers. He felt a familiar ache of helplessness, the same feeling that had washed over him in the quiet, sterile halls of the hospital all those years ago. Throughout the ordeal, Major had been a silent observer, watching from his spot on the rug. He had seen Sam's growing frustration and despair. Now, as the cabin sank into a deep and sorrowful quiet, the dog rose. He moved not with the casualness of a pet, but with a slow, deliberate grace that commanded attention. He stretched his powerful frame, walked over to the box, and peered inside. Sam tensed, ready to intervene, but he held back. There was no aggression in Major's posture, only a profound and focused calm. What happened next would forever be etched in Sam's memory. Major lowered himself to the floor beside the box, his movements slow and careful, as if not to startle the fragile beings within. He rested his great head on his paws and let out a sound Sam had never heard before. It was not a growl or a whine, but a deep, low thrumming that seemed to vibrate from the very core of his chest, a sound of pure, unconditional comfort. Inside the box, the frantic peeping stopped. For a long moment, there was absolute silence. Then, slowly, two small heads lifted. Instead of cowering, they turned toward the source of the sound, toward the large, warm presence just beyond their flannel-lined world. Driven by an instinct older than fear, they shuffled closer to the side of the box, pressing their downy bodies against the cardboard as if to absorb the reassuring vibration. Sam watched, his breath caught in his throat. It was a miracle unfolding in the soft firelight. This was not something taught in any ranger's manual. This was the language of life itself, a connection that defied every known rule of predator and prey. Seizing the moment, he quietly prepared the minced fish one last time. He approached the box slowly and extended his finger. This time, one of the eaglets, the slightly bolder of the two, hesitated for only a second before its beak opened and took the food. Its sibling watched, and after another gentle rumble from Major, it too began to eat. They ate until the small portion was gone, their hunger finally overpowering their fear, all while the magnificent German shepherd lay beside them, a steadfast and silent guardian. Hope, warm and bright, flooded back into the room. Looking at the two survivors, their bellies full for the first time in his care, Sam knew they needed names. He looked at the one who had eaten first, noting its fierce, resilient gaze. "Spirit," he murmured. He then looked at its sibling, who now seemed to be looking toward the cabin window, at the vast, dark sky outside. And, "You'll be freedom." From that night on, Major was no longer just Sam's dog. He was a father, He became the chicks' living anchor. He slept beside their box every night, a warm and furry mountain range protecting their small valley. When Sam brought food, Major would nudge the box with his nose, a gentle signal that their protector was present and it was safe to eat. As days turned into weeks, Spirit and Freedom grew stronger. Their downy fuzz began to give way to the first hints of pin feathers. They grew bold enough to venture out of the box, and Major's world became their playground. They would stumble over his paws, investigate his twitching ears with their beaks, and even try to climb his broad, sloping back. Major endured it all with limitless patience, occasionally turning his head to groom one of them with a startlingly gentle lick, treating them not as birds, but as his own strange, feathered puppies. An impossible family had taken root in the little cabin, a quiet testament to a love that knew no species. The passing weeks painted the forest in the deeper greens of late summer, and with the changing season, Spirit and Freedom were transformed. The soft, downy fluff of their infancy was nearly gone, replaced by a mottled coat of brown and white feathers that looked awkward and oversized on their adolescent frames. They were no longer tiny, helpless creatures confined to a box, but lanky, long-legged birds full of a restless energy. Their playground expanded from Major's back to the entire cabin and the porch outside, their movements a clumsy dance of hops, stumbles, and the occasional surprisingly graceful stride. A new instinct had awakened within them, a pull towards the vast, open sky that Sam had been expecting with a heavy heart. He would watch them from his armchair as they perched on the porch railing, their heads cocked to follow the flight of a distant hawk. They would stretch their wings, now impressively broad, and beat them against the air in powerful, uncoordinated bursts that lifted them a few feet off the ground before they tumbled back to the wooden planks. The world they were interested in was no longer just the world at their feet. It was the world above. Major sensed the change too. He would lie on the porch, his watchful gaze following their upward glances. When a wild eagle's cry echoed from the high peaks, Spirit and Freedom would freeze, their bodies rigid, listening to a call he could not answer. A low, troubled whine would sometimes escape Major's throat, a sound of quiet confusion. The bond between them had not weakened, but a new, invisible boundary was being drawn by the hands of nature itself. He was their guardian on the ground, but he could not follow them into the sky. The outside world arrived one morning in a dusty Ford pickup that rattled up the long gravel driveway. A woman in her early 40s stepped out, her practical hiking boots crunching on the gravel. She had a lean, athletic build, and her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her name was Dr. Anna Riley, an ornithologist from the Regional Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. Word of Sam's unusual family had finally reached her, and she had come to see for herself. Her professional skepticism melted the moment she stepped onto the porch. Spirit was perched on the railing, while Freedom was attempting to tug playfully at Major's tail. Major, ever patient, simply turned his head and nudged the young eagle gently with his nose. Anna stood motionless, her observant eyes wide with astonishment. "I've read about interspecies bonds, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice full of genuine awe. "But to see this, it's beyond anything the textbooks can describe." She spent an hour observing them, her initial wonder slowly giving way to a more serious, professional concern. Finally, she sat down with Sam at his kitchen table. "What you and your dog have done is a miracle," she began, her tone gentle but firm. "You saved their lives, but their attachment to Major is now the single biggest threat to their future." She explained the danger of imprinting on a ground mammal. In the wild, a dog is a predator, a threat. If they don't have a natural fear of canines, they won't survive a week. To have any chance, Sam, they need to learn to be eagles, and that means they have to be separated from him, immediately. Sam's heart felt like a lead weight in his chest. He knew she was right. Every bit of his ranger training told him so. With a slow, pained nod, he agreed to try. The attempt was a disaster. They moved Spirit and Freedom into the spare bedroom, ensuring they had food and water, and closed the door. The moment the latch clicked, the cabin was filled with a sound of pure panic. They were no longer the soft peeps of infancy, but the harsh, piercing shrieks of terrified raptors. Sam could hear them thrashing against the walls, the desperate sound of wings beating against wood. The effect on Major was even more devastating. He shot to his feet, whining, and ran to the bedroom door. He scratched at the wood, his paws frantic. When the eagle's cries grew more desperate, Major's anxiety exploded into raw, primal grief. He lifted his head and let out a long, mournful howl that echoed the sorrow of the birds inside. He howled again and again, scratching at the door, ignoring Sam's commands, until the wood was scarred with deep gouges and his claws were splintered and raw. It was more than Sam could bear. After less than an hour, he threw open the door. The room was a wreck, and the two eagles were huddled in a corner, trembling. The moment they saw Major, they rushed forward. Major, ignoring his bleeding paws, frantically nudged and licked them, checking them for injuries, his entire body trembling with relief. They immediately fell silent, pressing against his warm body. The failed experiment left all three of them exhausted and traumatized, a huddled mass of fur and feathers, proving that the boundary between them was not fragile at all. It was unbreakable. The air in the cabin was thick with the aftermath of trauma. Spirit and Freedom were pressed so tightly against Major's side that it was hard to tell where the fur ended and the feathers began. Major, in turn, had his body curled around them, a living fortress of comfort, his gentle licks the only medicine that seemed to work. Dr. Anna Riley stood in the doorway, her scientific certainty shattered by the raw, undeniable proof of a bond that transcended logic. The failure of the separation was absolute, and in that failure, she saw the only possible path forward. "We can't break this bond, Sam," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "So we have to work with it." She took a deep breath, the look on her face one of a professional about to take a massive risk. "I have a proposal. It's unorthodox. And frankly, my superiors will think I'm crazy. We bring Spirit and Freedom to the center. They'll have the large flight enclosures, the proper diet, everything they need to prepare for the wild. But we make you and Major part of the program. You can visit on a strict schedule. Your presence will be their anchor, the emotional stability they need to endure the stress of becoming what they were born to be." It was a terrifying and hopeful proposition. Handing them over felt like another kind of separation, but Sam knew it was their only chance. He looked at the two young eagles, then at the unwavering loyalty in Major's eyes, and he nodded. The journey to the center was quiet and somber, with Spirit and Freedom in a large carrier in the back of Anna's truck, and Major watching them from the cab, whining softly every time the truck hit a bump. The following months fell into a strange new rhythm. Twice a week, Sam and Major would make the long drive to the North Cascades Eagle Rehabilitation Center. The reunions were explosive moments of joy. The eagles, who were growing into magnificent subadults, would call out from their massive enclosure the moment they saw the truck, and they would greet Major with excited hops and affectionate nudges. The plan was working. Anchored by the visits, Spirit and Freedom thrived. They mastered soaring on the mountain updrafts that swirled through their enclosure and became adept at snatching practice lures from the air. Their release date was set for early autumn. The call came on a Tuesday. It was Anna, her voice strained. "There's been an accident, Sam. It's Spirit." During a flight drill, he had misjudged a landing and collided with a rock face. The wing was broken. While the fracture itself was treatable, a severe infection had set in. The real crisis was not in his body, but in his will. The resilient eagle Sam knew had vanished. He refused food, shrugging off all attempts to help him. He had withdrawn to a dark corner of the medical enclosure, a magnificent creature, simply waiting to die. The strongest antibiotics were useless against an animal that had lost its desire to live. Sam drove through the night, Major sitting silent and alert in the passenger seat, as if he understood the gravity of their journey. He found Anna outside the quarantine wing, her face etched with exhaustion and defeat. "We're losing him, Sam," she admitted, her voice breaking. "He won't take medication, he won't take food. His body is giving up." "Let Major see him," Sam said, his voice firm with a desperate conviction. "I can't," Anna argued, shaking her head. "This is a sterile area. A dog. That dog is the only family he has ever known," Sam interrupted, his gaze unwavering. "What good is a sterile room if the patient's spirit dies inside it? Please, Anna, it's our last chance." Looking from Sam's desperate face to the utter stillness in the quarantine room, Anna made her choice. She nodded. Major was led into the sterile room, his paws cleaned, his movements slow and deliberate. He walked to the enclosure where Spirit lay, a still and broken form. He did not bark or whine. He simply lay down on the cool concrete floor, his eyes fixed on the bird. Through the observation window, Sam watched as Spirit, who had not moved in hours, slowly lifted his head. His cloudy eyes focused on the familiar shape of his guardian. A faint, weak cry escaped his beak, a sound not of pain, but of recognition. With great effort, he shuffled closer to the mesh and rested his head against it, as close to the dog as he could get. A vet tech approached cautiously, holding a syringe of broth laced with antibiotics. This time, Spirit did not fight. With Major lying peacefully beside him, providing a silent, powerful reassurance, he allowed the syringe into his beak and swallowed. It was the first nourishment he had taken in days. In the quiet of the medical wing, surrounded by science and technology, it was a bond of pure, unexplainable love that administered the first true dose of medicine. The will to live, sparked by the presence of his unlikely father, had returned. The first snows had already dusted the highest peaks of the Cascades by the time Spirit's wing was declared fully healed. His recovery, fueled by Major's steadfast presence during their continued visits, had been remarkable. Now, standing beside his brother Freedom, he was the picture of wild magnificence. They were no longer awkward adolescents but powerful young adults, their heads crowned with the brilliant white feathers of their kind, their eyes a sharp, piercing yellow that held the intensity of the sun. The time had come. There were no more reasons to wait. The day of the release was crisp and clear, with an autumn sky so blue it hurt the eyes. Dr. Riley chose a high, windswept ridge that overlooked the valley, a perfect launching point into the vast wilderness that was their birthright. Sam stood silently, his hand resting on Major's neck, his heart a turbulent mix of pride and sorrow. Major seemed to understand everything. He sat perfectly still, his body tense, his gaze locked on the large carriers. When Anna opened the doors, the eagles hesitated for only a moment, taking in the scent of the pine and the endless expanse of sky. Then, with a shared, piercing cry, they burst forth. They ran a few steps, their powerful wings catching the wind, and launched themselves into the air. But they did not fly away. Instead, they began to circle, gaining altitude with each effortless rotation, their wingspans casting fleeting shadows over the three figures on the ridge. They circled directly above them, lower than any wild eagle would dare. It was not a random flight path. It was a deliberate, undeniable farewell. Major looked up, a soft whine escaping his lips, his tail giving a single, slow wave. He was not saying goodbye to birds. He was saying goodbye to his sons. After 3 final graceful circles, Spirit and Freedom tilted their wings in unison and soared east towards the jagged, snow-covered peaks, their forms growing smaller and smaller until they were swallowed by the immense blue canvas of the sky. Sam felt a tear roll down his weathered cheek and dropped his hand to scratch behind Major's ears. "You did good, boy," he whispered. "You did real good." The silence that fell over the cabin in the following days was a heavy blanket. The familiar sounds of claws on the wooden floor, the occasional squawk, the very energy of the young eagles was gone, leaving an unnerving void. The porch railing looked bare. The corner where their box once sat was just an empty space. The quiet that Sam had once cherished now felt like loneliness. Major felt it most acutely. He would spend hours lying by the large picture window, his head on his paws, his gaze fixed on the empty sky. Every time a large bird passed overhead, his ears would prick up, his body would tense with hope, only to slump back down in disappointment. His usual joy was gone, replaced by a quiet, waiting grief. Sam understood. He shared the dog's ache, the feeling of a purpose fulfilled. And now, gone. He spent more time brushing Major's thick coat, talking to him in low, comforting tones, their shared loss forging their own old bond even stronger. They had done the right thing, the only thing they could do. But goodness did not erase the emptiness. Months passed. Winter cloaked the mountains in a deep, silent white, and then reluctantly gave way to the vibrant greens of spring. Life for Sam and Major found its new, quieter rhythm. The sharpest edges of their grief had softened, replaced by a tender memory. One bright afternoon, they were hiking a familiar trail high in the foothills, the air alive with the scent of new growth. Suddenly, a cry echoed from above. It was a sound that shot through both of them like a bolt of lightning, a call they knew as well as their own heartbeats. They both stopped and looked up. Circling directly overhead, their magnificent forms dark against the brilliant sky, were two adult bald eagles. They rode the thermal currents with a mastery that took Sam's breath away. Then one of them descended, swooping lower than it should, its sharp eyes fixed on the man and dog below. It let out that same specific cry again, a call that was not a warning or a challenge, but a clear, ringing note of recognition. For a long minute, they graced the sky above them, a private, breathtaking ballet for an audience of two. It was a visit, a thank you, an acknowledgement that their impossible family still existed. Then, as one, they tilted their wings and soared away, disappearing back into the wild freedom that was their destiny. Sam watched them go, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He placed his hand on Major's head, feeling the steady warmth of his companion. The bond was not broken. It had simply been released. It was as eternal and as free as the sky itself. In a world that often teaches us about limits, the bond between a dog and the eagles he raised shows us a simpler truth. Family is not defined by blood or by species, but by the quiet language of loyalty, the warmth of a selfless heart, and the ultimate courage to let go so that another can soar. Every animal has a story of devotion waiting to be told. To ensure these profound connections are always shared and celebrated, we invite you to join our community, so the voice of Paws will always find its way to you.